She walked into a room where grown men lowered their eyes and loaded guns stayed hidden under silk jackets. The little girl with the mafia boss's scar was not supposed to be there. Outside New Orleans, rain beat against the windows like a warning. Inside, Damon Cross sat at the head of the table, a man who could buy silence and punish betrayal before dessert. Then a soaked 7-year-old girl held up her wrist, and his whole empire went still. Because some scars are not wounds. They are messages from the past. If you've ever lost someone, waited too long to tell the truth, or wondered whether a dangerous heart can still learn to love, stay with this story. Like the video and comment where you're watching from before the secret is revealed. The girl's words did not fade after she said them. They stayed in the room like smoke after a gunshot, hanging over the white tablecloths, the untouched wine, and the men who suddenly understood that they were standing inside a moment too private for witnesses. Damon Cross stared at the crescent scar on the child's wrist. For most of his life, Damon had believed his own mark was only an old family wound. His father had carried it. His grandmother, too. A pale curve above the pulse shaped like a small moon. In the Cross family, people called it a blessing when they were feeling sentimental, and a curse when they were being honest. Now that same mark rested on the wrist of a soaked little girl who had just said the name Mara Harper. Damon slowly lowered his own hand to the table. The knife beside his plate caught the light. Men in that room had seen him use less information than this to end a life. They waited for an order. They expected rage, suspicion, maybe violence. What they did not expect was the silence. The girl's yellow raincoat dripped onto the polished floor. Her lips had gone pale from the cold, but she stood straight, as if someone had taught her that trembling was acceptable only if nobody noticed. Damon looked at Cole Ramsey near the door. Clear the room. Cole did not move right away. His eyes stayed on the child. Damon. Damon's voice dropped. Now. Chairs moved back. Cloth napkins fell beside plates. Men who could stare down police captains and rival crews avoided looking at the little girl as they filed out. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded louder than it should have. Only Cole remained. Damon did not tell him to leave. Cole had earned the right to survive certain silences. The child watched both men carefully, not like a spoiled kid waiting to be comforted. Like someone measuring exits, like someone who had learned that adults could change shape without warning. Damon stepped around the table slow enough not to frighten her. What's your name? She held the photograph tighter. Abigail Harper. Do people call you Abigail? My mom called me Abby. There it was again. My mom. Not in the present. Not anymore. Damon felt something inside his chest shift, something old and badly buried. How did you get here, Abby? Her eyes flicked toward the door. Bus. From where? Baton Rouge. Cole muttered a curse under his breath. Damon kept his face still. You came from Baton Rouge by yourself. Abby nodded once. My neighbor put me on the bus. She said she couldn't keep me because her sister was sick and the landlord was asking questions. Mom told me if she died, I had to find you. Damon swallowed. It felt like glass. Your mother told you that? She said not before. Only if there was nobody else. The words struck harder than accusation. Mara had made him the last resort. Not the first choice. Not the man to run to. The man to find when every safer door had closed. Damon took off his suit jacket and held it out. Abby looked at it as if kindness might have a hidden price. It's dry, he said. She hesitated, then let him place it around her shoulders. The jacket swallowed her small frame. The sleeves hung past her hands. Cole's face stayed hard, but his eyes softened for half a second. Damon pointed to a chair. "Sit down." Abby climbed into it carefully, making sure her muddy shoes did not touch the white cushion. She placed the photograph on the table between them. Damon looked at it again, though it hurt to do so. The picture was old, bent at one corner, protected inside a plastic sleeve. He knew the night it had been taken. Frenchman Street 8 years ago, outside a jazz bar with blue lights in the windows. Mara had been laughing because he had told her he hated having his picture taken. She had said men who avoided cameras were either criminals or cowards. He had kissed her 5 minutes later in the alley behind the bar while a trumpet played somewhere in the rain. In the photo, he was younger, not innocent. Damon had never been that, but less hollow. Mara stood beside him with her dark curls loose over one shoulder, her smile bright enough to make the whole street look forgiven. Damon touched the edge of the photograph. "Where did she keep this?" "In a book." "What book?" Abby's face tightened as she tried to remember. "The one with the birds on the cover. She kept letters in it, too." Damon looked up. "What letters?" Abby reached inside her raincoat and pulled out an envelope damp at the edges, but sealed inside another layer of plastic. On the front, in handwriting Damon had not seen in nearly 8 years, were 3 words. For Damon Cross. His name looked different in Mara's hand. Softer. Almost human. Damon took the envelope but did not open it right away. Cole moved closer. "We need to verify everything." Damon's eyes remained on the handwriting. "I know." The child heard the cold edge in his voice and misunderstood it. Her shoulders pulled inward beneath the jacket. "If I'm not supposed to be here, I can go." Damon looked at her sharply. "No." Abby flinched. The reaction cut through him. He had frightened grown men for so long that fear had become background noise. But this was different. Her fear was small, instinctive, earned somewhere else. Damon forced his voice lower, gentler, though gentleness felt like a language he had once known and forgotten. "No, Abby. You're not going back into the rain." She stared at him, waiting for the trick. "There's soup in the kitchen," he said. "Can you eat?" She nodded. "Are you allergic to anything?" "No." "Do you hate anything?" That question seemed to confuse her. "I don't know." Damon turned to Cole. "Get her something warm." Cole left without argument. For a moment, Damon and Abby were alone. Outside, thunder rolled over New Orleans. The French Quarter below was alive with music, laughter, spilled liquor tourists, taking pictures under balconies, and men in alleys who knew better than to say Damon Cross's name too loudly. His world kept moving. The city kept breathing. But at that table time had folded around one impossible child. Damon opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, a folded birth certificate, and a second photograph. The birth certificate listed the child's name as Abigail Rose Harper. The father's name was blank. The photograph showed Mara holding a newborn baby wrapped in a white blanket. She looked exhausted, pale, beautiful in a way that made Damon hate every year he had missed. On the back, Mara had written one sentence. "She has your mark. I am sorry I waited until the end." Damon sat down. He did not mean to. His body simply decided it could no longer stand. Abby watched him with the cautious concern of a child who felt responsible for adult pain. "Are you mad?" Damon looked at her. There were 100 true answers. He was mad at Mara, mad at himself, mad at the 8 years between then and now. Mad at the city, at his enemies, at the version of himself Mara had feared enough to run from. But none of that belonged on Abby's shoulders. "No," he said. She looked unconvinced. "My mom said you might be." Damon's throat tightened. "What else did she say?" Abby rubbed her thumb across the plastic sleeve of the photograph. She said you were not a simple man. A sound almost escaped him. Not a laugh. Something bruised and close to it. That sounds like Mara. She said if you looked angry, I should wait. Because sometimes people look angry when they are scared. Damon looked down at the letter again. Mara had known him too well. Even at the end, even after all that silence, she had known exactly what would happen to his face when the past walked through the door in a yellow raincoat. Cole returned with a bowl of soup bread and a towel. He set them in front of Abby with a care he would have denied if anyone asked. Abby whispered thank you and ate slowly. Too slowly. She took small spoonfuls, pausing between each one as if saving room for hunger later. Damon noticed. He noticed everything now. The way she sat at the edge of the chair prepared to leave. The way she folded the napkin after using it. The way she kept checking Damon's expression before taking another bite. Children were supposed to be careless with comfort. Abby treated it like borrowed money. Cole stood behind Damon. We need to talk. Not here. Abby looked up immediately. Damon caught it. You can finish eating, he told her. Nobody is sending you anywhere tonight. The promise sounded too large for a man who had not known she existed an hour ago, but once spoken, it rooted itself inside him. Cole followed Damon to the far side of the room near the windows. Rain slid down the glass in silver lines. Cole kept his voice low. Boss, this is a problem. Damon looked back at Abby. She's a child. She is a child with your blood, maybe. Which makes her a target, definitely. Damon said nothing. Cole leaned closer. You know how this works. The second anyone outside this room hears about her, every enemy you have will start counting her breaths. Damon's jaw tightened. Then nobody hears. Cole gave him a look that carried 20 years of loyalty and exhaustion. Secrets don't stay buried in New Orleans. They float up after the first hard rain. Damon watched lightning brighten the rooftops beyond the window. The city belonged to him in ways no legal document would ever prove. He controlled liquor permits, dock schedules, private security contracts, judges who owed favors, and men who smiled too easily in public. He had built his empire from back rooms, river warehouses, and debts whispered over poker tables after midnight. People called him a businessman when microphones were near. They called him the devil when they thought he could not hear. He had survived by following 3 rules. Never show weakness. Never trust sudden gifts. Never love anything someone else could use as a blade. Abby Harper had broken all 3 before finishing half a bowl of soup. Cole folded his arms. Wesley Knox is already pushing along the river. At the mention of the name, Damon's eyes cooled. Wesley Knox was a younger man from Mississippi with expensive shoes, cheap loyalty, and a hunger that made him reckless. He had been buying friends near the docks for months. He wanted roots, judges, union men, and the kind of fear Damon had spent 2 decades perfecting. Knox doesn't know about her, Damon said. Not yet. Damon turned from the window. Then we keep it that way. Cole's mouth tightened. You cannot keep a child hidden like a weapon in a safe. I can keep her alive. Those are not always the same thing. Damon almost snapped at him. Any other man would have bled for that sentence. Cole did not even blink. Their history went back before the suits and the money, before the mansion in the Garden District, before Damon's name became a warning. Cole had been there when Damon was just a hard-eyed street kid with bruised knuckles and too much pride. He knew which parts of Damon were armor and which parts were wound. Damon looked toward Abby again. She had stopped eating. Her eyelids drooped, but she was fighting sleep with all the dignity her small body could manage. Find out who knew Mara in Baton Rouge, Damon said. Neighbors, doctors, landlord, anyone who helped with the funeral. Quietly. Cole nodded. And Rebecca, call her. Cole's eyebrows lifted. At this hour, Damon gave him a flat look. Cole took out his phone. Rebecca Lane answered on the 5th ring, her voice rough with sleep and irritation. This better involve a body. Damon took the phone. Not yet. A pause. Damon, I need guardianship papers. Another pause, longer this time, for whom Damon looked at the child wrapped in his jacket. My daughter. Silence stretched across the line. When Rebecca spoke again, her voice had changed. Do you understand what you just said? No. The honesty surprised even him. But I am going to. Rebecca inhaled slowly. Where is the mother? Damon looked at Mara's letter in his hand. Dead. I'm sorry. The words felt strange coming through the phone. Polite grief for a woman who had once been the only soft place in his life. I have a birth certificate with no father listed, Damon said. A letter from the mother. A family mark. We will need DNA. Yes, Rebecca said. And you will need patience, restraint, and a miracle with clean paperwork. I can get paperwork. You cannot threaten a family court judge into believing you are a stable parent. I know that. Do you? Damon did not answer. Rebecca sighed. I will come in the morning. Until then, do not move her across state lines, do not intimidate any social workers, and do not let your men refer to her as an asset. Damon glanced at Cole. That will not happen. Good. And Damon. What? If this is true, your life just became evidence. The call ended. Damon stood with the phone in his hand while the room settled around him. His life had always been evidence of something. Violence, discipline, control, sin hidden under polished shoes and expensive cologne. But now it might be measured against a child's need for safety, against whether Abby slept through the night, against whether she learned to laugh without checking the door. He returned to the table. Abby had finished the soup and folded the napkin into a careful square. Do you want more? He asked. She shook her head. Did you get enough? A tiny hesitation. Then she nodded. Damon did not believe her, but he let it pass. He was beginning to understand that pushing too hard would only teach her to hide better. You can sleep here for a few hours, he said. Then we will go somewhere safer. Where? My house. Abby's eyes widened slightly. Do you have other kids? No. A wife? No. A dog? No. She thought about that. Does anybody live there besides you, staff? Guards sometimes. So no family. Damon had no answer ready. No family, he said. Abby looked down at the photograph of him and Mara. My mom said you used to smile. Cole, pretending not to listen from across the room, became very still. Damon looked at the younger version of himself in the photograph. I did. Why did you stop? The question was too innocent to be cruel, which somehow made it worse. Damon folded Mara's letter and placed it carefully back into the envelope. I forgot how. Abby accepted this with the seriousness children reserve for things they cannot fix. My mom sang when she was sad, she said. Not loud, just enough so the room knew she was still there. Damon looked at her. What did she sing? Abby's eyes lowered. Old songs, ones about leaving. Damon closed his hand around the envelope until the paper bent. 8 years ago, Mara Harper had disappeared from his life without goodbye. He had searched at first, quietly, then violently. He had questioned bartenders, musicians, old friends, women from dressing rooms, men who thought they could lie to him. Nothing. Mara had vanished so completely that Damon eventually accepted the only explanation his pride could survive. She had chosen to leave him. She had chosen a life where his name did not follow, So he had let that belief harden inside him. He had called it betrayal because betrayal was easier than grief. He had told himself he was better without the ache of loving someone he could not control. He had become richer, colder, more feared. He had turned longing into territory and heartbreak into discipline. And all the while, somewhere in Baton Rouge, Mara had been raising his daughter. The memory of their last fight returned with painful clarity. Mara standing near the window of his old apartment, her arms wrapped around herself. Outside, police sirens faded down Canal Street. A warning had been left on her car that morning. A single white rose on the windshield, its stem wrapped in black thread. Damon had promised protection. Mara had stared at him with tears in her eyes and fury in her voice. "I do not want guards at my door, Damon. I do not want men following me to the grocery store. I do not want to ask permission to breathe just because you love me." He had stepped toward her. "That is not what love is." "No," she had said. "That is what your fear calls love." He remembered being angry because she had seen through him. He remembered telling her she did not understand his world. He remembered the way her face changed. "I understand enough," she had whispered. "I understand that every woman near you becomes a hostage to men who hate you." He had said things after that. Proud things. Cruel things dressed as logic. By morning, she was gone. Now Abby sat at his table wearing his jacket, and Damon understood that Mara had not run from love. She had run from the cage his love would have built. Cole approached again. "Car is ready." Damon nodded. Abby slid off the chair and reached for the photograph. Her fingers moved fast, protective. Damon noticed. "You keep it," he said. She looked surprised. "You don't want it?" "I do." Her grip tightened, but it was hers. Damon crouched in front of her, careful with the distance. "Then it stays with you." Abby searched his face. "My mom said you might take things because you could." Damon absorbed that quietly. She was right about a lot of things. Abby tucked the photograph inside her raincoat. "Are you going to take me to people who ask questions eventually? Tonight? No. Tomorrow? Maybe." She looked toward the door the men had left through. "Are they bad men?" Damon almost said no. It would have been convenient. It would have been false. "They are my men. That is not what I asked." The corner of Cole's mouth twitched almost a smile. Damon ignored him. "Some have done bad things," Damon said. "Have you?" The room seemed to lean toward his answer. Damon had lied to police judges, enemies, friends, priests, lovers, and himself. He had built a life out of controlled truths. But Abby's eyes made dishonesty feel filthy. "Yes," he said. She did not move away, but the question that followed came softer. "Did my mom know yes? Did she hate you?" Damon looked at Mara's letter. "No." Abby seemed relieved and hurt at the same time. She said hating people takes up too much room. Damon's mouth tightened. She said that Abby nodded. She said we did not have a big enough apartment for hate. Cole looked away. Damon stood before the child could see what that sentence had done to him. The walk downstairs felt unreal. The Magnolia Room staff had been cleared from the hall. Damon's men stood at careful distances, eyes forward, weapons hidden but ready. Abby walked beside him in the oversized jacket, one hand curled around the plastic-covered photograph in her pocket. At the back entrance, the rain had softened to a steady mist. A black car waited in the alley. Abby stopped before getting in. Damon looked down. "What is it?" She stared at the open car door. "My mom said not to get into cars with strangers." Damon almost told her he was not a stranger. But of course he was. Blood did not erase absence. A scar did not make him safe. He lowered himself to one knee on the wet pavement. Your mother was right. Abby blinked. Damon continued. I am still a stranger to you, so Cole will ride with us. You can sit near the door. If you want the car to stop, you say stop. Cole glanced at him, surprised. Abby thought it over with grave seriousness. Will it stop? Damon nodded. Yes, even if you do not want it to. The question went straight into the heart of him. Yes. Only then did she climb into the car. Damon sat across from her. Cole took the front passenger seat. The car pulled away from the alley and slipped into the wet streets of New Orleans. The city blurred past the windows. Neon signs glowed in puddles. Music spilled from bars where people danced without knowing that Damon Cross was riding through the storm with a child who had cracked open his life. Abby pressed her forehead lightly to the glass, watching the city as if it were another country. Damon watched her reflection. Mara's eyes, his scar, her own silence. After a while, Abby spoke. Did you love my mom? Damon's answer came without strategy. Yes. Abby kept looking out the window. Did she love you? Damon saw Mara laughing under blue lights. Mara barefoot in his kitchen. Mara angry enough to cry. Mara leaving before dawn with his child beneath her heart. Yes, he said, voice rougher than before. I think she did. Abby nodded once as if filing that away somewhere important. She told me love is not always enough if people do not know how to stay. Damon closed his eyes for a second. The car turned onto St. Charles Avenue, where old oaks arched over the road and streetcar tracks shone in the rain. His mansion waited in the garden district behind iron gates and trimmed hedges, a house built to impress guests and intimidate enemies. It had marble floors, locked rooms, security cameras, and wine cellars, deeper than some people's homes. It had never had crayons on the table. It had never had a child asking whether the car would stop if she was afraid. Damon looked at Abby as the gates opened. For the first time in years, he entered his own home feeling like the intruder. The car rolled up the long drive, headlights washing over white columns and dark windows. Abby sat very still, clutching the photograph of a mother who was gone and a father who had not yet earned the name. Damon stepped out first, then waited in the rain while she decided whether to follow. At last, Abby placed one small shoe onto the wet stone driveway. By sunrise, the marble floors of Damon Cross's house were waiting for a child who had no idea how to call any place home. The marble floors of Damon Cross's house were waiting, but Abby Harper did not step onto them right away. She stood just inside the front doors with rainwater still dripping from the hem of her yellow coat. Her small fingers wrapped around the plastic-covered photograph, as if the picture might run from her if she loosened her grip. Above her, the chandelier glowed like frozen fire. Ahead of her, the grand staircase curved upward with polished wood rails and a red runner that looked too clean for real footsteps. Damon watched her from a few feet away. He had brought governors into this foyer, judges, union bosses, men who smiled while planning betrayal. None of them had ever looked as lost as the child standing beneath his roof. Abby looked down at her muddy shoes. Do I take them off? Damon followed her gaze. Mud had already marked the marble. One of the housekeepers near the hallway noticed too, then quickly looked away when Damon's eyes moved in her direction. For half a second, the old answer rose in him. Of course, shoes came off. Of course, mess had rules. His house had survived for years because everything inside it knew its place. Then he saw Abby's shoulders lift, bracing for correction. No, he said. Floors can be cleaned. She looked up uncertain. It is okay. Yes. She stepped forward. A small, muddy print appeared on the marble. Damon saw it and felt something strange, almost like relief. Proof that a living person had entered the house. Proof that not everything here had to remain untouched. Cole came in behind them, folding an umbrella. I'll have the staff prepare a room. Damon looked at Abby. Do you want to pick one? Her eyes widened. A room. A bedroom. She looked toward the staircase. For sleeping? Damon nearly said something sharp, not at her, but at the world that had taught her to ask such a thing. He held it back. Yes. For sleeping. Abby hesitated. I don't need a big one. Cole glanced at Damon. Damon kept his voice even. You can choose any room on the second floor except mine. Why except yours? Cole covered a cough badly. Damon looked at him, then back at Abby. Because I sleep there. She considered this as if it were a legal answer. All right. They climbed the stairs slowly. Abby's small hand moved along the railing, careful not to leave wet fingerprints. She peered into each room from the doorway, but did not enter until Damon told her she could. One room had blue curtains and a view of the garden. Another had cream walls and a fireplace that had not been lit in years. Another had a balcony overlooking the old oak trees that lined the drive. Abby chose the smallest. It had pale green walls, a narrow bed, and a window facing the side garden where rain tapped against the leaves of magnolia trees. Damon stood behind her. You can have a bigger one. She shook her head. This one does not echo. That answer settled in the room. Damon looked around and heard it then. The quiet of his own house. Not peaceful quiet. Empty quiet. The kind that made every footstep feel like an intrusion. We'll make it yours, he said. Abby turned to him. For how long Damon had closed deals with senators. He had lied under oath without sweating. He had faced guns at his temple and smiled. But this child's question pinned him in place. For as long as you wanted, he said. Her face did not change. People say things like that when someone dies. Damon remembered Mara's handwriting, the birth certificate, the photograph of the newborn baby. Then I'll say it again tomorrow. Abby lowered her eyes, but she did not argue. A housekeeper named Mrs. Alvarez brought towels, a folded blanket, and one of Damon's old shirts because there were no children's clothes anywhere in the house. Abby accepted them with both hands and whispered thank you. She did not ask for privacy, but Damon stepped out anyway and closed the door most of the way. Cole waited in the hall. You know she needs a doctor? I know. And real clothes, I know. And food that is not from a restaurant kitchen. Damon looked at him. Cole raised one hand. I am just saying you own half the city, but there is not a single box of cereal in that kitchen. Damon glanced toward the closed bedroom door. He could hear water running in the bathroom. Send someone. Cole's mouth twitched. For cereal for everything a child needs. That is a wide category. Then buy the store. Cole stared at him. Damon exhaled through his nose. Fine. Buy one of each thing. That is not better. Before Damon could answer, the door opened. Abby stood there in the oversized shirt, her wet hair combed with her fingers, the sleeves hanging past her wrists. She had folded her raincoat over one arm and placed her shoes neatly beside the door. I can sleep on top of the blanket so I don't mess it up, she said. Damon's chest tightened. You can sleep under it. But it is clean. That is what it is for. Abby seemed unsure, but she nodded. She climbed into bed with the careful movements of someone entering a place that might not belong to her by morning. Damon placed the blanket over her. The gesture felt awkward in his hands. He had tucked weapons into jackets with more grace than he tucked in that blanket. Abby looked at him from the pillow. Are you staying? Damon did not know what the question meant. Staying in the room. Staying in the house. Staying in her life. Maybe all three. I'll be down the hall. That is not staying. He looked at the small moon-shaped scar above her wrist. No, he said. I suppose it is not. He pulled a chair near the door and sat. Abby watched him for a long moment. Her eyelids slowly grew heavy. My mom used to sit until I fell asleep, she whispered. Damon's voice came quietly. Then I'll sit. She turned her face toward the window. Within minutes, her breathing softened. Damon remained in the chair long after she had fallen asleep. Outside, the rain thinned into mist. Dawn pushed pale light across the walls. The house stirred around him. Footsteps moved downstairs. Low voices carried through the vents. Somewhere in the kitchen, a cabinet opened and shut. Life began entering rooms that had forgotten how to hold it. At 7 a.m, Rebecca Lane arrived in a navy coat, her hair pinned tight and her face sharpened by too little sleep. She took one look at Damon sitting outside a child's bedroom and stopped walking. Well, she said softly, that is new. Damon stood. Keep your voice down. Rebecca's expression shifted. Not amusement. Not judgment. Something more careful. She asleep? Yes. Good. Then we talked downstairs. In the study, Rebecca spread papers across Damon's desk while Cole leaned against a bookcase. Damon stood near the window with a cup of coffee he had not touched. Rebecca began with the facts. The birth certificate names Mara Harper as the mother. No father listed. The letter may help, but it is not enough. The scar is compelling to you. It means nothing to the court. We need DNA confirmation medical records. Mara's death certificate, proof of residence, and an explanation of why a child traveled from Baton Rouge to New Orleans alone. Cole folded his arms. That last part sounds bad. It is bad, Rebecca said. It sounds like neglect, abandonment, or both, even if the truth is more complicated. Damon's eyes narrowed. Mara did not neglect her. I did not say she did. I said the system may ask that question. The system can ask me. Rebecca looked at him over the papers. The system is not one of your dock foremen, Damon. You do not get to stare it into obedience. Cole looked at the floor, wisely silent. Rebecca continued. There may be a neighbor, temporary caregiver. Social services might already have a file if Mara died 9 days ago. If someone reports the child missing every hour matters. We need to get ahead of it legally. She stays here, Damon said. She can stay here for now, but understand something. Your reputation is not a rumor in this city. It is a weather pattern. Judges feel it before you enter the room. Then find one who is not afraid of weather. Rebecca placed both hands on the desk. You want to keep her safe? Then stop speaking like every room is a territory dispute. You need to become boring on paper. Stable address, medical care, school plan, therapist, proper clothes, normal meals. No armed men standing in hallways where a child can see them. Cole made a faint sound. That may be difficult. Damon looked at him. Cole straightened. Not impossible. Rebecca softened slightly. I am not saying this to insult you. I am saying it because a court will not care that you can protect her from men like Wesley Knox. They will ask if you can protect her from you. The sentence moved through the study and left no clean place to stand. Damon turned back to the window. In the garden below, rainwater clung to leaves. Beyond the iron fence, New Orleans kept its secrets under a gray morning sky. She is my daughter, he said. Rebecca's voice gentled, but only a little. Then prove it in ways that do not frighten her. A small sound came from the doorway. All 3 adults turned. Abby stood there barefoot in Damon's oversized shirt, one sleeve falling off her shoulder. Her face was pale with sleep and her eyes moved across the papers on the desk. Am I in trouble? Damon crossed the room before he thought about it, then stopped himself from moving too fast. No. She looked at Rebecca. Are you the people who ask questions? Rebecca crouched, her professional armor softening at the edges. I am Rebecca. I help with papers. Abby frowned. Papers can make people leave. Rebecca glanced up at Damon, then back at the girl. Sometimes, but these papers are meant to help adults do the right thing. Abby looked unconvinced. Damon said, "Have you eaten?" She shook her head. In the kitchen, the staff had placed fruit toast eggs, oatmeal, orange juice, and coffee across the island like they were feeding a visiting royal family. Abby stopped at the entrance. "Is someone else coming?" "No," Damon said. "All that is for breakfast." "Yes." She approached the food carefully. Damon pulled out a chair. Abby climbed into it and picked one slice of toast. Nothing else. "You can have eggs," he said. "I'm okay. There's oatmeal." "I'm okay. Fruit. I said I'm okay." The words came out sharper than she expected. Her face changed instantly. "Sorry." Damon hated the word more each time she used it. "You do not need to apologize for answering me." I used a rude voice. "You used a true voice." She studied him as if this might be a trap. Cole entered with 2 large paper bags from a store. Clothes, toothbrushes, crayons, books, socks, a stuffed rabbit, and a nightlight shaped like the moon spilled across the counter. Abby's eyes went to the rabbit first, then away. Damon saw it. "You can have that." She touched one ear with her finger. "Is it for me?" "Yes." She held the rabbit carefully against her chest, but not too tightly. "What is its name?" Cole asked. Abby looked startled that anyone would care. "I don't know yet." Cole nodded with great seriousness. "A name is important. No need to rush." Damon glanced at him. Cole shrugged. "What?" For the first time that morning, Abby's mouth almost curved. The rest of the day moved in uneven pieces. A doctor came and examined Abby in the green bedroom, while Damon stood in the hallway like a guard dog outside a chapel. She was tired, underweight, and recovering from a cold, but otherwise physically safe. The doctor recommended rest, regular meals, and patience. Damon did not like things he could not buy or command. Patience was one of them. Later, Rebecca arranged for DNA testing and began tracking Mara's records in Baton Rouge. Cole reduced visible security around the house, moving guards away from windows and doors Abby used most. Mrs. Alvarez cleared a shelf in the kitchen for cereal, peanut butter crackers, and apple juice boxes because Damon had apparently purchased enough child-related groceries to feed a summer camp. By afternoon, Abby sat at the kitchen table with crayons spread before her. Damon stood in the doorway watching. She drew silently. First the house, then trees, then rain, then a little yellow shape near the front door. The man in the picture stood far away from the house. He was tall and dark and had no face. Damon felt Cole beside him before he heard him. "She draw you." Damon did not answer. "At least you made the paper," Cole said. Damon gave him a warning look. Cole lifted his hands and left. Abby finished the picture and stared at it. Then she carefully tore it from the pad and looked around. What do you do with drawings here? Damon had no idea. Mrs. Alvarez, passing through with towels, answered gently. In most houses, people put them on the refrigerator. Abby looked at Damon for permission. He nodded. She carried the drawing to the refrigerator. There were no magnets except one from a restaurant Damon owned and another shaped like Louisiana. She used both. The paper hung slightly crooked. Abby stepped back. The kitchen changed. Not much. Just enough. That night Damon tried to make dinner because Dr. Nora Bennett, the therapist Rebecca recommended, had said on the phone that shared routines mattered. Damon had not cooked for himself in years. He burned grilled cheese on the first attempt and produced something pale and half-melted on the second. Abby sat at the island watching him with quiet interest. "Do you know how to cook?" Damon stared at the pan. "No." "Why are you doing it?" Because a stranger with a calm voice told him children needed ordinary things. Because his house was full of people who could serve meals on silver trays, and none of that felt like fatherhood. because Mara had probably stood in a tiny kitchen after long shifts making dinner for a child he had not known existed. "I am learning," he said. Abby picked at the edge of the sandwich when he set it in front of her. "It is not that bad. That means it is bad. A little." Damon looked at her. She looked back. Then, unexpectedly, a small laugh slipped out of her. It lasted less than a second, but it struck him harder than applause, loyalty, or fear ever had. Later, Dr. Nora arrived. She was in her 40s with calm eyes and a voice that did not ask permission to be steady. Abby sat with her in the small parlor while Damon remained by the door. Nora noticed. Mr. Cross, children often speak more freely without an audience. Damon did not move. Abby looked down at the stuffed rabbit in her lap. Nora turned toward him. "You can wait in the hall." The old Damon disliked being dismissed in his own house. The new Damon saw Abby's fingers tighten around the rabbit. He stepped into the hall. Through the closed door, he could not hear the words. That bothered him. He was used to knowing things. People's debts, secrets, weaknesses. He had survived by staying ahead of every hidden knife. Now a child's healing was happening on the other side of a door, and he had no right to force it open. Cole found him there. "You look like you are waiting for sentencing." Damon stared at the door. "Maybe I am." When Nora finished, she asked to speak with him alone. They went to the study. She did not sit behind his desk. She chose the chair opposite him, placing them level. "Abby is polite," Nora said. "I noticed. Too polite." Damon leaned forward. "She has learned to make herself easy to keep. Children who fear abandonment often become very careful. They apologize for hunger. They minimize pain. They watch adult moods. They try not to need too much." Damon thought of the toast, the folded napkin, the way Abby had asked how long the room was hers. "How do I stop it?" Nora's expression did not change. "You do not stop it. You create enough safety that she no longer needs it." "How?" "Consistency. Predictable routines. Honest answers. No sudden disappearances. No promises you cannot keep. And no confusing protection with control." Damon looked away. Nora's voice softened. "She does not need a perfect father tonight. She needs an adult who stays calm when she is afraid." "I am not known for calm." I did not say quiet. I said calm. There is a difference. After Nora left, Damon went to the kitchen. Abby's drawing was still on the refrigerator. The faceless man stood far from the house under a small crescent moon she had added after dinner. Damon looked at it for a long time. The next morning, Abby found him there with a cup of coffee in his hand. "You kept it," she said. "It was on my refrigerator. I thought maybe you would take it down." "Why?" She shrugged. "Some people do not like kid stuff." Damon looked around the kitchen. Crayons on the table, the stuffed rabbit on a chair, apple juice boxes in a perfect line because Cole had arranged them like ammunition. "I think the house can survive kid stuff." Abby moved beside him and stared at the drawing. "The man does not have a face yet." I noticed. I did not know what face to give him. Damon felt the words land softly and deeply. "You can decide later." She nodded. For several seconds they stood shoulder to shoulder, both looking at the same crooked picture. Then Abby reached into the pocket of her sweater and pulled out the old photograph of Damon and Mara. "Can this go there too?" Damon looked at the image. Mara laughing, his younger self beside her, a life that had split open without his knowing. His first instinct was to keep the photograph somewhere safe. A drawer, a locked box, his study, some private place where grief could be controlled. But Abby held it toward the refrigerator. So Damon took another magnet and placed the photograph beside the drawing. Mara's smile filled the kitchen. Abby watched his face. Does it hurt to look at her? Yes. Then why did you put it up? Damon looked at the photograph, then at the child who had carried it through rain to find him. Because she belongs here too. Abby was quiet for a long time. Then she placed the stuffed rabbit on the kitchen table, climbed into a chair, and reached for a blue crayon. Damon did not interrupt. By evening, 3 more drawings hung on the refrigerator. One of the moon, one of a rabbit, one of the big house with a yellow light in one window. The man in the drawing still had no face, but this time he stood closer to the door. That night, after Abby fell asleep, Damon sat alone in his study with Mara's letter open on the desk. The house no longer felt silent. It creaked, breathed, held the faint smell of burned butter and crayons. Somewhere upstairs, a moon-shaped nightlight glowed in a room that no longer echoed. Damon read the final line of Mara's letter again. If she finds you, do not teach her to fear the world the way you do. Teach her there is still a reason to stay. He folded the letter with care. A little before dawn, he called Cole. "Bring the car." Cole's voice was rough with sleep. "Where are we going?" Damon looked toward the staircase where Abby slept beneath a clean blanket in the smallest bedroom. "Baton Rouge," he said. "I need to see where Mara raised my daughter." By the time the car left New Orleans, the rain had stopped, but the roads still shone like black glass beneath the morning light. Damon sat in the back seat with Mara's letter folded inside his coat. Cole drove without speaking. He knew better than to fill grief with noise. The city faded behind them, iron balconies and old oaks giving way to open highway gas stations, flat fields and the long gray line of sky pressing down over Louisiana. Damon had been to Baton Rouge many times for business. He had sat in private rooms, bought favors, settled disputes, and left before sunrise. He had known the city by its useful doors. Now he was going there to meet the years that had passed without him. Mara's last apartment stood above a closed flower shop on a quiet street near the edge of town. The brick building had faded green shutters and a narrow staircase on the side. A plastic pot of dead herbs sat by the door. The place did not look tragic. That somehow made it worse. It looked ordinary. A place where people paid rent late, carried groceries upstairs, listened to neighbors through thin walls, and kept living because life did not pause for broken hearts. The landlady, Mrs. Jeanine Bell, waited for them with a ring of keys in her hand. She was a small woman with silver hair, brown skin, and sharp eyes that had not softened just because Damon wore an expensive suit. "You are him," she said. Damon did not ask what she meant. "Yes." Mrs. Bell looked him over, not impressed. "She never spoke badly of you." Damon glanced toward the upstairs door. She should have. Maybe. Mrs. Bell turned the key in the lock, but Mara said hate was too heavy to carry while raising a child. The apartment opened with a tired creak. Damon stepped inside and stopped. It was small, smaller than some closets in his house. A couch with worn blue fabric sat against one wall. A round kitchen table had 2 mismatched chairs. Children's books were stacked beneath the window. Medical bills lay clipped together in a basket beside envelopes marked past due. A yellow mug rested near the sink, chipped at the rim. There were no luxuries. No signs of surrender either. Mara had made a life here with almost nothing. Damon moved through the room slowly, as if any sudden step might disturb the ghost of her routine. He saw Abby's drawings taped along the refrigerator. Birds, moons, a woman singing on a small stage, a little girl standing beside a tall shadow with no face. He stared at that one for a long time. Mrs. Bell watched him. "She asked about you sometimes." Damon's voice came low. "Mara. The girl." He looked at her. "Not every day," Mrs. Bell said, not in a sad way, More like children ask about weather in places they have never been. Damon swallowed. What did Mara tell her? That you were complicated. Cole looked away from the window. Damon almost smiled, but it died before it reached his mouth. Mrs. Bell led him to the kitchen doorway. On the wood frame were pencil marks with dates beside them. Abby age 4, Abby age 5, Abby age 6, Abby age 7. The marks climbed in small, patient increments. Damon reached out, but did not touch them. He had missed birthdays, fevers, first lost teeth, nightmares, questions, school drawings. He had missed the growing of his own child, and the proof was measured in pencil on cheap wood. Mrs. Bell's voice softened. Mara worked until she could not stand straight. Weddings, cleaning, singing in bars when her lungs allowed it. She never asked much. Pride can keep a woman warm for only so long, but she wore it like a coat. Damon looked toward the bedroom. When did she get sick? About a year ago, though. I think she knew before that. She hid it from Abby as long as she could. Why did she not call me? Mrs. Bell's eyes sharpened again. You asking me because you want the truth, or because you want someone to blame? Cole shifted near the window, but Damon raised one hand. The truth. She was afraid you would come with guards and lawyers and men with dead eyes. She was afraid Abby would become a princess in a locked tower. She loved that child too much to hand her over to a beautiful cage. The words did not shout. They did not need to. Damon entered Mara's bedroom alone. The room held a narrow bed, a small dresser, and a chair near the window. A scarf hung over the back of the chair, dark blue soft from use. Damon remembered buying it from a street vendor after Mara said the night air made her throat ache. She had laughed when he tried to negotiate the price down for sport, then paid the vendor double when Damon was not looking. He picked up the scarf and closed his eyes. For a moment, the years folded. Mara in a jazz bar, one hand on the microphone singing like every word had once broken her heart. Mara barefoot in his kitchen stealing blackberries from a bowl. Mara standing in the doorway of his apartment with tears in her eyes, telling him love was not supposed to feel like being watched. On the dresser sat a wooden box. Mrs. Bell appeared behind him. She told me if the little girl ever found you, you should have that. Damon opened it. Inside were letters, dozens of them, some sealed, some unfinished. Birthday cards Abby had made for a father she had never met. A hospital bracelet, a small silver bracelet with a half-moon charm, a photograph of Mara holding Abby in front of a grocery store cake, both of them smiling under paper streamers taped to a wall. Damon sat on the edge of the bed. The first letter began with his name. Damon. I almost called you today. Abby asked why some children have fathers at school pickup and some do not. I told her families come in different shapes. She accepted that because children accept what they must. I hated myself for making her accept so much. He lowered the page. Cole stood in the doorway but said nothing. Damon read another. Damon. She has your temper, though she uses it quietly. She presses her mouth shut when she is angry, just like you. She also has your eyes when she is trying not to be afraid. I see you in her, and some days it feels like comfort. Other days it feels like punishment. Another. Damon. I left because I was pregnant. There. I have written it plainly. I left because I knew you would try to protect us by taking over every breath we took. You would have loved her. I know that. But your love came with locks. I wanted our daughter to know the sky was bigger than your war. The paper shook in Damon's hand. Mrs. Bell had returned to the kitchen, giving him privacy he had not earned but needed. Cole finally spoke. You all right? Damon folded the letter carefully. No. Cole nodded once. Good. Damon looked at him. Cole shrugged. Better than lying. They packed the box. Abby's books, some clothes, the drawings from the refrigerator, and a small stuffed bird with one button eye. Damon paused at the kitchen doorway before leaving. The pencil marks remained. He wanted to cut the frame out of the wall and take it with him. The thought was so much like ownership that it shamed him. Instead, he took a picture with his phone. When they returned to New Orleans, Abby was waiting in the kitchen with Mrs. Alvarez. She looked up as Damon entered, her eyes moving first to the box in his hands. "You went to our apartment?" "Yes." "Did it look bad?" The question was quiet, but Damon heard what sat beneath it. "Did you judge us? Did you see how little we had? Did you think less of her?" He set the box on the table. "It looked like your mother worked very hard to make a home." Abby's lips pressed together. She liked the window in the kitchen because birds sat on the wire. "I saw the drawings. Did you bring them?" Damon opened the folder. Abby touched each picture as if greeting old friends. Then he placed the silver half-moon bracelet in front of her. Abby's face changed. She wore that when she sang. "She wanted you to have it." Abby picked it up but did not put it on. "Can you keep it tonight?" Damon did not understand. "For me," she added, "not forever." He closed his fingers around the bracelet. "Yes." That afternoon, Dr. Nora came again. Abby sat with her in the parlor while Damon waited in the hall, this time with less anger, but no less discomfort. When the session ended, Nora asked to speak with him outside. They stood on the back porch while late sunlight spread across the garden. "She is holding herself together with both hands," Nora said. Damon looked through the window. Abby was arranging crayons by color. "She seems calm. Calm is not the same as safe. She is performing stability because she thinks grief makes adults leave." Damon turned toward her. "What do I do when she asks questions I cannot answer? Tell the truth in a way a child can carry. And if the truth makes me look like a monster," Nora studied him, "then do not ask her to pretend you are not one. Show her what you are doing to become safer." Damon looked back at Abby. "She asked if my men were bad." "What did you say?" "Some have done bad things." "And you," I said yes. Nora nodded. That was a beginning. The word stayed with him. A beginning was not forgiveness. It was not trust. It was only the first plank over deep water. The next few days moved with strange domestic rhythm. Abby began school under the name Abigail Harper. Damon refused to surround her with visible guards, though Cole placed quiet protection at a distance. Miles Reed, a young bodyguard with kind eyes and nervous hands, drove her each morning in a plain car. Abby liked him because he did not talk too much, and because he knew the names of birds. On her first day, Damon walked her to the school entrance. The building smelled like floor wax paper and raincoats. Children's voices bounced off the hallway walls. Abby wore star socks, a blue sweater, and the expression of a soldier entering uncertain territory. She stopped before the classroom door. "Do they know about you?" Damon crouched, ignoring the looks from two teachers nearby. "Who?" "The teachers. The kids. Do they know you are important?" The word important carried too much weight. "They know you are Abby Harper." She looked at the floor. "Is Cross my name too?" Damon felt the question move through him. "Only if you want it to be. Would that make my mom sad?" "No." "How do you know?" Because Mara had written his name on an envelope and sent Abby through the rain with his photograph. Because even after fear, silence, and death, she had left one narrow bridge between them. But Abby needed a smaller truth. "Because your mother wanted you to find me." Abby nodded, then entered the classroom without looking back. Damon remained in the hallway longer than necessary. A teacher glanced at him. "Sir." He stood. "I am leaving." His voice made it sound like a warning. He softened it badly. "Thank you." At home that evening, Abby said school was fine. Nora had warned him that fine often meant too much or not enough. Damon did not push. He sat at the kitchen table while she colored. After a while, she spoke without looking up. "Were you bad to my mom?" The crayon in her hand kept moving. Blue across white paper, a sky forming above a house. Damon placed his coffee down. "I loved her. That is not what I asked." He looked at the photograph of Mara on the refrigerator. "No," he said. "I was not bad to her the way you may mean. I never hit her. I never wanted her hurt." Abby waited. "But I scared her. I made my world too close to her. I thought keeping danger near me meant I could control it. She knew better." The crayon stopped. "Did she leave because of me?" Damon moved carefully, as if one wrong word could crack the floor beneath her. "No. She left because of me." Abby stared at the paper. "She missed you sometimes." Damon's chest tightened. "She did. She sang when she missed you. Not happy songs." He looked down at his hands. "I missed her too." "Then why did you not find us?" The question was simple. The answer was not. "I tried to find her at first. Then I let pride tell me she did not want to be found. That was easier than admitting I had lost her." Abby's eyes filled, but the tears did not fall. Adults are bad at saying things. Damon almost smiled through the pain. "Yes. My mom said that too." He reached into his pocket and placed the half-moon bracelet on the table. Abby touched the charm. She said the moon can look broken and still be whole. Damon looked at the silver curve beneath her finger. "She used to say that to me." Abby finally looked at him. "Were you broken?" Damon answered after a long silence. "Yes." "Are you still?" He could have said no. He wanted to. But children like Abby heard false comfort, like a wrong note in a song. Some parts. She pushed the bracelet toward him. "You can hold it a little longer." That night Damon went to Mara's grave. The cemetery was quiet, the kind of quiet that belonged only to old places and the dead. Above ground, tombs stood pale beneath the fading sky. Moss clung to stone angels. Flowers wilted in glass vases. Somewhere beyond the wall, traffic moved distant and indifferent. Mara Harper's name was carved cleanly into a new stone. Damon stood before it without guards close enough to hear. For years he had believed he knew how to speak to the dead. Men he had buried in memory received silence. Enemies received nothing. His father received curses on certain nights and forgiveness on none. But Mara deserved words. He removed the bracelet from his pocket and held it in his palm. "You were right to run," he said. The wind moved lightly through the cemetery trees. Damon looked at her name. "I hate that you were right. I hate that I was exactly the man you feared I would be. I hate that you had to carry all of it alone because I could not understand the difference between love and possession." His voice roughened. "She is brave. Too brave. She apologizes when she is hungry. She watches doors. She looks at me like she is trying to decide if blood can be trusted." He closed his eyes. "I do not know how to be her father." There. The truth at last. "I know how to protect territory. I know how to make men afraid. I know how to win. But she does not need a king. She needs someone who stays without turning the whole world into a prison." He placed the bracelet on the stone, then stared at it. For one selfish moment he wanted to leave it there. A gift to Mara, a piece of her returned. Then he saw Abby's small hand pushing it toward him across the kitchen table. He picked it back up. "No," he whispered. "She needs this more than you do." The next evening, Abby fell asleep on the couch during an old animated movie. She had insisted she was not tired, then lost the argument halfway through a song. Damon sat at the other end of the couch pretending to read contracts. Her stuffed rabbit rested beside her. The moon nightlight glowed from the hallway. Slowly in sleep, Abby's head tipped against his arm. Damon froze. He did not move. He barely breathed. Cole entered the room carrying a file and stopped. His gaze went from Abby's sleeping face to Damon's rigid posture. "Need help." Damon's whisper was deadly serious. "If you wake her, I will bury you under the pool house." Cole nodded solemnly and backed out. For nearly 2 hours, Damon sat still while his daughter slept against him. His arm went numb. His shoulder ached. He did not care. When Abby finally stirred, she blinked at his sleeve wrinkled beneath her cheek. "Sorry." The word was soft automatic, half asleep. Damon looked down at her. "Do not apologize for sleeping. I wrinkled your shirt. I have other shirts." She rubbed her eyes. "You stayed?" "Yes." "Because I fell asleep. Because you did." Abby studied him with that careful gaze of hers. Then she settled back against his arm, awake this time. Damon looked at the television without seeing it. On the refrigerator in the kitchen, the faceless man in Abby's drawing now had eyes. Not a smile yet. Not a name written beneath him. But he had eyes. And for that evening, under the quiet roof of a house, learning how to hold warmth, it was enough. Across the river in a downtown bar filled with smoke-colored light and careless laughter, Tucker Dale lifted his glass and said Damon Cross had a little girl drawing moons in his kitchen. Tucker Dale did not understand that loose words in New Orleans traveled faster than bullets. He sat in a corner booth at a downtown bar called the Saint's Glass, drunk on bourbon and the warm foolishness of being near powerful men. The room smelled like old wood-spilled beer, expensive perfume, and secrets people pretended were jokes. A trumpet moaned from the speakers. Outside, the sidewalk shone from an earlier rain. Tucker had never been important inside Damon Cross's world. He collected envelopes, stood near doors, drove when told, and laughed too loudly when higher men made cruel jokes. He wanted to be noticed. Men like him always did. So when a red-haired woman at the bar smiled and asked why his boss had missed a private game that week, Tucker leaned closer and lowered his voice just enough to make sure the people nearby could still hear. "Boss has gone domestic," he said, lifting his glass. "Got a little princess now. Kid drawing moons all over his kitchen." The woman raised her eyebrows. Damon Cross. With a kid. Tucker laughed. "Little girl. Cute thing. Wears those tiny socks with stars on them. Whole house turned into a schoolroom overnight." He did not see the man 3 stools away stop stirring his drink. He did not notice when that man paid cash and walked out without finishing it. By noon the next day, Wesley Knox knew Damon Cross had a daughter. Wesley received the news in a hotel suite overlooking the river. He stood in a white shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows, smiling at the Mississippi as if it had personally promised him the city. He was younger than Damon, handsome, in a polished, empty way with blue eyes that never seemed to warm. Men followed him because he gave them permission to be cruel and called it ambition. The man who brought the information stood by the door. "A girl," Wesley said. "Yes." "Age 7, maybe 8. Name Abigail Harper. Goes by Abby." Wesley turned from the window. Harper. The name meant nothing to him yet, but he liked the shape of the opportunity. A child was not power. A child was pressure. Men like Damon built walls around their hearts and called themselves untouchable. Wesley had always believed every wall had a door. He poured himself coffee from a silver pot. "Find out where she goes to school." The man hesitated. Wesley looked up. "I did not ask if your conscience had thoughts." The man lowered his eyes. "Yes, sir." That afternoon, Abby came home from school quieter than usual. Damon noticed before the car reached the front steps. He was standing in the doorway when Miles opened the back door. Abby climbed out with her backpack held against her chest, the stuffed rabbit tucked inside one arm. Her star socks were wrinkled around her ankles. Her face looked composed, but Damon knew the difference now. Abby's silence had shapes. This one had sharp edges. Miles looked pale. Damon's voice stayed calm. "What happened?" Miles glanced at Abby, then back at Damon. She found something in her backpack. Abby's fingers tightened around the straps. Damon crouched, not caring that the driveway stones were damp. "Can I see it?" For a second, she did not move. Then she reached into the front pocket of her backpack and handed him a folded piece of paper. Damon opened it. Inside was a photograph of Abby standing near the school playground. She had been looking up at something beyond the frame, one hand shading her eyes from the sun. The picture had been taken from behind a fence. On the back, written in black marker, were 5 words. "Even kings have daughters." The world around Damon went still. No rage crossed his face. No shout came from his mouth. The emptiness that settled over him was worse. Miles took one step back without meaning to. Abby watched him closely. "Is it bad Damon folded the paper once?" "No." Her eyes hardened with hurt. "That is a lie." Cole came out behind Damon and saw the photograph in his hand. Damon passed it to him without speaking. Cole read the message, then looked toward the street. Inside, Cole said to Miles. Damon lifted his hand. "Not like that." Cole stopped. Damon turned to Abby. "Someone took a picture of you without permission. That was wrong. I am going to find out who did it." "Is it because of you Damon could feel every old instinct rising inside him? Deny. Control. Reassure by force. Tell her children did not need to know adult danger. Build walls before she saw the men coming. But he saw Mara's handwriting in his mind. Do not teach her to fear the world the way you do." He kept his voice low. "It is because of the life I built before I knew you." Abby looked down. "So yes." Damon had no answer that would not insult her intelligence. "Yes," he said. She nodded as if she had expected that and hated being right. Inside the house, the mood changed so quickly even the walls seemed to notice. Phones rang. Men arrived without using the front door. Cole moved through the halls with quiet commands. Cameras were checked. Routes were changed. Names were pulled from old files. Miles stood in the kitchen, guilt written across his face, while Rebecca spoke rapidly into her phone near the pantry. Abby sat at the table with a glass of milk she had not touched. Damon watched from the doorway as 2 men crossed the hall carrying black cases. Her eyes followed the cases. She knew what they were. Maybe not fully, but enough. Damon stepped into the hall and stopped the men with a look. Not where she can see. They turned at once. Abby lowered her eyes to the milk. Later, Damon found her in the laundry room. She was sitting between 2 baskets of clean towels, knees pulled to her chest, the stuffed rabbit pressed under her chin. The room smelled like soap and warm cotton. It should have been harmless. She had chosen it because it was small. Damon sat on the floor outside the doorway, giving her space. "I looked for you. I was here. I see that." She rubbed the rabbit's ear between her fingers. "Are people going to get hurt because I came here?" The question opened something in him that anger could not close. "No." She looked up. "People always say no when the answer is yes." Damon rested his forearms on his knees. "You did not bring danger into this house." She said nothing. "I did." Her face changed a little. I came to you because your mother sent you, because I should have been someone safe enough to find before she had no choice." Abby swallowed. "My mom said you would protect me." Damon closed his eyes for half a second. "I will. I don't want people killed for me." The words were small, but they hit the floor between them with terrible weight. Damon thought of how easily he could answer. "I will do what has to be done." That was the language of his world. Men accepted it. Enemies feared it. Women like Mara ran from it. Abby waited. He said, "I do not want you carrying things that belong to me." "What things?" "My violence." The word made her blink. He did not take it back. That night, Damon prepared for war without calling it war. Cole brought maps, names, phone records, school security footage, vehicle plates. Rebecca contacted people whose job titles sounded clean and whose debts were not. Miles retraced every turn from school to home until his voice went hoarse. Damon stood at the center of it all with the photograph laid flat on his desk. Wesley Knox. He did not need proof. Not for himself. Wesley's arrogance was all over the message. Even kings have daughters. Only a man desperate to be crowned would write that. Cole leaned over the desk. "I can have men at Knox's club in 20 minutes. "No." Cole looked at him. Damon's eyes stayed on the photograph. "If we hit him tonight, Abby wakes up to a city on fire. She already knows something is wrong. That does not mean I hand her proof." Cole lowered his voice. "Damon, if Knox thinks he can touch her without consequence, he will do it again." Damon looked up then, and the room seemed to lose temperature. "He will have consequence." Cole waited. Not the kind he can use. By midnight, Damon made the decision to move Abby to the Algiers house. It was smaller than the mansion hidden on a quiet street across the river, with blue shutters, a fenced yard, and no history attached to Damon's name. It had been purchased through 3 companies and forgotten until emergencies required it. Abby stood in the foyer while Mrs. Alvarez packed a small bag. "We are leaving, for a little while," Damon said. She stared at him. "You said my room was mine." "It is." "Then why can't I sleep there?" "Because a man had put a camera on your childhood. Because my enemies now know your face. Because I built a kingdom where love becomes a target." Damon chose the only answer he could make small enough. "Because I need to make sure it stays safe." Abby's eyes filled with a quiet anger that looked painfully like Mara. "If it was home, I could stay." Damon could not speak. Cole appeared behind him and looked away. The drive to Algiers was silent. The city lights shimmered over the river. Abby sat in the back seat with her backpack on her lap, refusing to lean against the seat. Damon sat beside her, feeling the distance between them grow inch by inch. The safe house smelled like dust lemon cleaner and locked rooms. Mrs. Alvarez had sent bedding ahead. Miles checked the windows while Cole walked the perimeter. Abby went straight to the small bedroom they had prepared for her and placed the stuffed rabbit on the bed. There were no drawings on the walls, no photograph of Mara on the refrigerator, no crooked house under a crescent moon. She turned to Damon. "Can I close the door?" "Yes. Will you open it?" "Not unless you ask me to." She closed it. Damon stood in the hallway for a long time. Cole came up beside him. "You did the right thing." Damon looked at the closed door. "Then why does it feel like I broke a promise?" Cole had no answer. The next morning, Abby ate half a banana and said she was not hungry. Nora arrived after breakfast wearing a soft gray sweater and carrying no clipboard. She found Abby at the kitchen table drawing a house with no door. Nora sat beside her. "That is a strong roof." Abby kept drawing. "It has to be." "Why?" So things do not get in. Nora nodded. Can people get out? Abby's crayon paused. There is no door. I see that. Abby added another window, then colored it black. Damon watched from the porch through the glass. Nora joined him outside 10 minutes later. You're trying to make her safe by making her world smaller, she said. Damon looked across the yard, where weeds grew through cracks in the patio. Would you prefer I leave her exposed? I prefer you. Understand that safety without trust can feel like a cage. He gripped the porch railing. A man took her picture at school. And now she has lost her room, her routine, her refrigerator, and the small proof that she belonged somewhere. His jaw tightened. I am keeping her alive. Yes, Nora said. Now make sure the child you are saving still recognizes her life when danger passes. Inside Abby's crayon moved again. No door. Damon looked at the drawing through the window and felt Mara's absence like a hand on his throat. At noon, Damon changed tactics. He called men he had not spoken to directly in years. He spoke to bankers, port commissioners, shipping brokers, campaign donors, private investigators, accountants, and one retired judge who owed him a favor from a winter night in 2009. No threats were spoken loudly. None were needed. Wesley Knox had mistaken restraint for hesitation. Damon did not send soldiers to kick in doors. He sent doubt. By evening, one of Wesley's investors pulled money from a warehouse purchase near the river. By morning, 2 port supervisors stopped returning his calls. By the second night, a union contact Wesley had been courting discovered his own brother's gambling debts had quietly been paid by Damon Cross years ago, and loyalty shifted before breakfast. Cole watched the operation unfold from the safe house dining table, papers spread around him. You are bleeding him without leaving marks. Damon signed a document Rebecca had couriered over. Marks create witnesses. Cole studied him. Old you liked witnesses. Damon looked toward the living room. Abby sat on the floor with Miles drawing birds from a library book. Miles was explaining the difference between a heron and an egret with the seriousness of a professor. Old me did not have to answer questions over breakfast. Cole followed his gaze. She asked you if people would get hurt. Yes. And you are trying to make the answer no. Damon capped the pen. I am trying to make the answer one I can say while looking at her. On the 3rd day, they found the man who had taken the photograph. He was a low-level scout connected to one of Wesley's river crews. He had followed the school pickup route twice, watched from across the street, and slipped the message into Abby's backpack when the class lined up after recess. Miles took the news like a physical blow. I should have seen him. Damon stood at the window. Yes. Miles went pale. Damon turned. You should have. And now you will learn from it instead of drowning in shame where it helps no one. Miles blinked, surprised by the mercy. Cole entered with another file. Tucker Dale was the leak. The room went silent. Damon slowly looked at him. Cole continued. He talked in a bar. Thought he was being funny. One of Wesley's people heard. Miles muttered something under his breath. Damon's face emptied again. Bring him. Tucker arrived an hour later, shaking so badly he could barely stand. 2 men brought him into the storage room behind the safe house kitchen. Damon stood alone under a bare bulb. Cole waited by the door. Tucker's eyes were wet. Boss, I swear I did not know. I was drunk. I was just talking. I would never put a kid in danger on purpose. Damon stepped closer. Tucker flinched. That flinch used to satisfy something in Damon. It meant order had been restored. It meant a lesson was near. It meant fear had remembered its owner. Now all Damon could see was Abby in the laundry room asking if people would get hurt because of her. Do you know what you did? Damon asked. Tucker nodded quickly. I talked too much. I was stupid. No. Tucker froze. You took a child who had just buried her mother and made her visible to a man who uses pain as negotiation. Tucker began to cry. I am sorry. Damon's voice stayed low. Sorry is what children say when they drop spoons because adults have taught them need is a crime. From you, it is not enough. Cole watched Damon carefully. Tucker fell to his knees. Please. Please, boss. Damon looked down at him. The old answer stood ready inside him. Clean. Final. Easy. Then from the next room came the faint sound of Abby laughing at something Miles had said. Damon closed his eyes. He imagined her older, asking what happened to Tucker, asking whether her father killed a begging man in a storage room because he was angry and afraid. He opened his eyes. You are out, he said. Tucker stared at him, not understanding. Damon continued. No crew, no protection, no money, no name to hide behind. You leave Louisiana tonight. If you speak of my daughter again, if you come near anyone connected to this house, if you sell one more careless word, you will spend the rest of your life wishing I had chosen the old way. Tucker sobbed with relief and terror. Cole opened the door. Get him out. When Tucker was gone, Cole remained. Old, you would not have let him walk. Damon looked at the floor where Tucker had knelt. Old me thought fear solved everything, and now Damon looked toward the wall that separated the storage room from the living room. Now I know fear leaks. That evening, Abby found Damon on the porch. The safe house sat quiet around them. Crickets sang in the weeds. Across the river, the lights of New Orleans shimmered like a city pretending not to burn. She climbed onto the porch swing beside him without asking. Damon let the silence rest. After a while, she said, Miles said the bird in the yard is a mockingbird. He is probably right. It copies other birds. Yes. Do people do that? Damon looked at her. Sometimes. Do you? He understood the question beneath the question. Are you pretending to be gentle? Are you copying something you do not really know how to be? I am trying to learn the real sound, he said. Abby watched the dark yard. That sounds hard. It is, she nodded. My mom said hard things still count if you do them slowly. Damon almost felt Mara sitting on the other side of the swing. Yes, he said. She would say that. Abby leaned back, but not against him. Not yet. On the fourth night, Damon agreed to meet Wesley Knox. The message came through an old channel near the docks. Wesley wanted to talk. Cole said it was a trap. Rebecca said it was reckless. Nora said nothing, only looked at Damon until he understood the question. Would he return as the man Abby feared, or as the man trying to become safer? The pier sat near the industrial edge of the Mississippi where cargo cranes stood black against the night and river fog crawled over the boards. Damon arrived with Cole and 2 cars kept at a distance. Wesley arrived with 4 men and the smile of someone who believed theater was the same as power. Wesley wore a pale suit despite the damp air. Damon Cross, he said, the city's favorite ghost. Damon walked forward until they stood beneath a flickering dock light. Say what you came to say. Wesley smiled wider. Fatherhood has made you rude. Damon did not answer. I admit, Wesley continued, I was surprised. All these years I thought you had no soft parts left. Then I hear there is a little girl with your eyes and her mother's name. Cole's hand shifted near his jacket. Damon's voice remained steady. You do not speak of her. I already have. Damon looked at him, then fully. Wesley's smile weakened for a fraction of a second. You know, Wesley said recovering a man with a child begins making emotional choices. No, Damon said. A careless man does. Wesley laughed. I had eyes on her school. I can have eyes elsewhere. Damon stepped closer. You had one man near her school. He is gone. You had 2 payments routed through a shell company in Gulfport. Frozen. You had 3 port contacts waiting for your money. They now believe your money is cursed. You had a judge willing to listen. He has developed a sudden interest in retirement. Wesley's expression shifted. Damon took a folder from Cole and placed it on the hood of a nearby car. Your investor in Memphis is talking to federal agents by morning unless I tell him not to. Your man Ellis has been selling your route numbers for 6 months. Your cousin in Jackson has already moved cash out of your account. Wesley grabbed the folder and opened it. His face changed page by page. Damon watched without pleasure. You came after my daughter because you thought love made me careless. The river moved heavily beside them. Damon leaned in. Love made me thorough. Wesley closed the folder. You think paperwork scares me? No. Isolation does. As if summoned by the word, Wesley's phone began to ring. Then one of his men's phones. Then another. The sound moved through the fog like insects. Wesley did not answer. Damon turned slightly enough to look at the river. You leave Louisiana before sunrise. Wesley's jaw tightened. And if I don't, then by breakfast every man still standing near you will understand that you are not a ladder. You are a grave being dug in public. Wesley's eyes flicked to Cole, then back to Damon. You would let me live after I threatened your blood. Damon saw Abby at the kitchen table asking if people would get hurt because she came here. My daughter asked me a question, Damon said. I am choosing an answer. Wesley stared at him with hatred and disbelief. Damon walked away first. Cole followed him toward the car. When they were out of earshot, Cole spoke quietly. He may come back someday. Damon did not look over his shoulder. Not as a king. The drive back to the safe house was silent until Cole pulled onto the bridge. New Orleans glittered ahead, beautiful and guilty. Cole said, You scared him. Damon looked out the window. No. Cole glanced at him. I left him alone. Men like Wesley are only brave with an audience. Damon returned before dawn. The safe house was quiet except for a single light in the kitchen. Abby sat at the table in her pajamas, her hair messy from sleep, a piece of toast on a plate in front of her. The stuffed rabbit sat beside the napkin. Damon stopped in the doorway. You should be asleep. I woke up. He entered slowly and sat across from her. She looked at his hands first. There was no blood, no bruised knuckles, no torn cuff. Did you hurt him? Damon leaned back. I stopped him. That is not what I asked. No fear in her voice. Only the demand for truth. Damon folded his hands on the table. No. I did not hurt him the way I wanted to. Abby absorbed that. Why? Because Mara had died before he could say he was sorry. Because Abby's room had no drawings in this house. Because power had cost him 7 years, and he was finally learning to count properly. Because I kept thinking about what kind of dad I wanted you to have. The word dad sat between them, fragile and unfinished. Abby looked down at her plate. After a moment, she pushed the toast toward him. You forgot breakfast. Damon stared at the toast, then at her. I did. It is cold. That is all right. He picked it up and took a bite. It tasted like nothing and everything. Abby watched him chew with solemn approval. Did the bad man go away? Yes. For always Damon would not lie to her. For now. And there are people making sure he keeps going. She nodded slowly. Can we go home? The question was quiet. Damon set the toast down. Yes. Today, yes. She looked toward the dark window where the first pale line of morning had begun to show. My drawings are there. I know. And Mom's picture. Yes. And my room. Damon's voice softened. Your room. Abby slipped down from the chair and picked up the stuffed rabbit. At the doorway, she paused. Damon. He looked up. She had not called him by any name very often. Not Mr. Cross, not Father, not anything that might ask too much. Yes. If someone takes another picture, do we have to leave again? Damon felt the weight of the answer. No. Her eyes searched his face. We make the house safer, he said. We do not make your world disappear. Abby nodded once. Okay. She walked back toward the bedroom. Damon stayed at the kitchen table until sunrise filled the room. When they returned to the Garden District house, Abby did not run inside. She stood in the foyer the way she had the first night, as if asking the house whether it remembered her. The marble floors were clean now. No muddy footprints remained. But on the refrigerator, her drawing still hung crooked under the magnets. Mara's photograph was still there. The man in the picture still had eyes and stood close to the door. Abby walked to the kitchen and touched the edge of the paper. Damon stood behind her. I told them not to move anything. She looked at him. Thank you. He nodded. Mrs. Alvarez appeared with a soft smile and a bowl of pancake batter. Cole stood behind her holding a pan with the grim focus of a man facing combat. Abby blinked. What are you doing? Cole looked at Damon. Apparently breakfast. Damon removed his coat and rolled up his sleeves. Abby glanced at the crescent scar on his wrist, then at her own. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then she climbed onto the stool at the kitchen island and pulled the blue crayon from the cup beside her. The house, which had held its breath for days, began breathing again. The house began breathing again with the smell of pancakes, burned butter, and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. Damon stood at the stove with his sleeves rolled up and a look of grave concentration on his face. Cole stood beside him holding a spatula as if it were a weapon he did not trust. Mrs. Alvarez watched from the sink, trying very hard not to smile. Abby sat at the kitchen island with her elbows on the counter, the blue crayon still in her hand, her eyes moving between the pan and Damon's scar. The first pancake came out black around the edges. Cole stared at it. That one is not going to make it. Damon looked at the plate. It is edible. Abby leaned forward, studied the pancake, and shook her head. It looks like a tire. Mrs. Alvarez turned toward the window and coughed into her hand. Damon gave Abby a solemn look. You have strong opinions for someone who is not cooking. I have eyes. Cole pointed the spatula at Damon. She has a point. Damon took the burned pancake off the plate and dropped it into the trash. The second one came out pale and folded in the middle. The third one looked almost normal. By the fourth, Abby had climbed down from the stool and stood beside Damon, telling him when the bubbles meant it was time to flip. She spoke softly at first, then with more confidence. Damon listened as if she were giving instructions for a delicate operation. When he finally placed a decent pancake on her plate, Abby cut a small bite, tasted it, and considered the matter with serious care. It is better. Damon nodded. Better is acceptable. It needs syrup. Cole placed the syrup bottle in front of her. Abby poured a careful circle, then looked up at Damon. Do you eat breakfast sometimes? That is not a real answer. Damon took a plate from the cabinet and sat beside her. All right. Today I eat breakfast. The kitchen grew quiet in a way that was not empty. Forks touched plates. Rain ticked softly against the windows. Mara's photograph watched from the refrigerator beside Abby's drawings, her smile bright and young and forever out of reach. Damon looked at the photograph only once, but Abby noticed. Does it still hurt? Yes. She nodded. Me too. He did not try to make the pain smaller with words. He had learned that grief did not obey men like him. It came and went as it pleased. It sat at tables. It rode in cars. It hid inside songs and old scarves and little girls who apologized too often. Abby cut another piece of pancake. "Can we take her flowers?" Damon looked at her. "Today, if you are not busy." The old answer would have been complicated. Meetings, calls, men waiting for orders, a city built on his attention. Damon picked up his coffee. "I am not too busy." Abby did not smile, but something in her shoulders loosened. Later that morning, Rebecca arrived with a leather folder pressed to her chest and the expression of a woman walking into a storm she had predicted. She found Damon in the study, where sunlight came through the tall windows and landed across his desk. For once, there were no maps of rival territories laid out before him, no photographs of enemies, no lists of debts. There were school forms, medical records, and a drawing of a mockingbird Abby had left beside his pen. Rebecca noticed the drawing. "She is making herself visible in your life." Damon looked at it. "Is that what this is?" "Yes. Try not to ruin it." He almost smiled. "Your faith in me is touching. My faith is limited. My paperwork is excellent." She placed the folder on the desk and sat across from him. The DNA result came in. Damon did not move. Rebecca opened the folder slowly. "She is your biological daughter." The room went still. Damon had known. The scar had told him. Mara's letter had told him. Abby's eyes had told him every time she looked at him, as if courage were something she had inherited against her will. Still, the proof struck deep. There it was in black ink. Not rumor, not memory, not hope. Blood given language by science. Damon reached for the page but stopped before touching it. Rebecca watched him. "You can pick it up." He did. His name sat beside Abby's on the document. Father and child separated by lines, numbers, signatures, and 7 lost years. Rebecca's voice softened. "The hearing is tomorrow afternoon. Temporary emergency placement has held so far because we moved quickly because Nora's report is strong and because Mrs. Bell confirmed Mara's wishes. But Damon the judge will ask questions. I know. About your work. I know. About your reputation. I know. About whether this house is safe." He set the paper down. "It will be." Rebecca leaned forward. "Not will be. Is. Courts care about the present more than promises. So tomorrow you do not perform power. You do not intimidate the room. You do not answer like a man defending territory." Damon looked at her. "How should I answer? Like a man who understands he is being trusted with a child not awarded property." The words might have angered him weeks ago. Now they only settled into him heavy and useful. The courthouse smelled like old paper-polished floors and nervous people trying to look calm. Damon arrived without his usual circle of men. Cole drove him and waited outside the courtroom. Miles stayed at the house with Mrs. Alvarez. Rebecca walked beside Damon with the folder in her arms. Abby came with Dr. Nora wearing a simple blue dress and the half-moon bracelet around her wrist. She looked very small on the wooden bench. Damon wanted to put his coat around her shoulders the way he had that first night in the restaurant. Instead, he sat beside her and kept his hands folded, because Nora had told him children needed adults who did not turn every fear into movement. Abby leaned closer. "Is the judge going to make me leave?" Damon felt the old violence wake in him at the thought. He kept his voice steady. "The judge is going to ask what is safest for you. What if she thinks it is not you? Then I will keep showing her until she understands." Abby looked at him. "You cannot scare a judge." "No. Rebecca said that." "Yes. She is smart. She is expensive." Abby's mouth twitched. The courtroom doors opened. The judge was a woman in her 60s with silver hair, clear eyes, and no visible fear of Damon Cross. That alone made Damon respect her. She reviewed the file, listened to Rebecca, listened to Nora, and asked questions that cut through polite language. Where had Abby lived before? Who cared for her after Mara died? Why had Damon not known of the child? What changes had been made in his home? How would he manage school therapy, medical care, and security without isolating her? Damon answered each question with fewer words than he wanted and more truth than felt comfortable. Then the judge looked at him directly. "Mr. Cross, why do you want custody of Abigail Harper?" The room quieted. Damon felt Abby beside him, not touching him but close enough that he could hear her breathing. He could have spoken of blood, money, protection, Mara's letter, his ability to provide every possible advantage. Instead, he looked at the judge and told the truth that had no polish on it. Because her mother trusted me when she had no reason left to. Because Abby came to me with a photograph, a letter, and more courage than most grown men I know. Because I missed 7 years I cannot buy back. I did not hear her first word. I did not take her to school. I did not sit beside her when she was sick. Her mother did all of that alone. His voice roughened, but he did not look away. I do not deserve an easy answer. I am asking for the chance to show up for the next day, then the one after that. And if this court decides someone needs to keep watching to make sure I do right by her, then let them watch. Rebecca's eyes flicked toward him, surprised. The judge studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at Abby. "Abigail, do you feel safe in Mr. Cross's home?" Abby held the bracelet on her wrist. Damon did not breathe. Abby looked at the judge, then at Nora, then at Damon. "Sometimes I get scared," she said. The honesty cut him and healed something at the same time. The judge nodded. Of him, Abby thought carefully. "Not like before. I get scared he will leave, or I will have to leave, or the house will change again. But he tells the truth when I ask. He burns pancakes. He put my mom's picture on the refrigerator. He says my room is mine." The judge's face remained still, but her eyes softened. Abby added quieter, "I want to stay." Damon lowered his head for 1 second. The judge granted permanent custody with continued supervision, required therapy, scheduled home visits, and regular reports. Damon accepted every condition without argument. Outside the courtroom, Abby stood near the courthouse steps while Rebecca spoke to Nora. Cole waited by the car, pretending not to care and failing. Damon looked down at Abby. "You did well. So did you. That surprises you a little." He nodded. "Fair." She held up the bracelet. "Can we take Mom flowers now?" "Yes." They bought white lilies from a small shop near the cemetery. Abby chose them because Mara had once said lilies looked like songs opening. At the grave, the sky was clear after days of rain. Sunlight touched the stone angels and made the cemetery seem less cold. Abby carried the flowers with both hands. Damon walked beside her slow enough for her steps. Mara's name waited on the stone. Abby placed the lilies carefully. "Hi, Mom." Damon stepped back, but Abby reached for his hand. "Stay." So he stayed. She looked at the grave. "I found him. He is not simple." Damon closed his eyes briefly. "He makes bad pancakes, but he is learning. He put your picture in the kitchen. He lets me keep the small room. He came to court and did not scare anybody." Damon heard Cole clear his throat somewhere behind them, far enough away to pretend privacy. Abby looked up at Damon. "Do you think she is mad at you? Never." "At you?" Damon looked at Mara's name. "Maybe." Abby nodded with grave certainty. "You should say sorry." The word should have been easy. It was not. Damon Cross had apologized in public when strategy required it with false softness and sharp eyes. He had never apologized like this. Not to Stone. Not to memory. Not to the woman who had loved him enough to leave and trusted him enough to send their daughter back. He stepped closer. I am sorry, Mara. The wind moved through the cemetery trees. I thought power meant keeping everyone afraid enough to stay in line. I thought protection meant control. I thought loving you gave me the right to decide what safety looked like. You knew better. His hand tightened gently around Abby's. I cannot give you back the years you carried alone. I cannot give Abby the father she should have had from the start. But I can give her the man I am trying to become now. Abby leaned her head against his side. Damon looked down at her and felt the shape of his life changing again, not with the violence of a door breaking open, but with the quiet weight of a hand trusting his. Over the next weeks, Damon began dismantling pieces of the world that had made Mara run. Not all at once, not cleanly. Men like him did not become innocent because a judge signed papers or a child drew pictures. But he began. He sold off 2 clubs where bad men had done worse things under music loud enough to hide screams. He cut business with a crew that used fear against families. He moved money into construction firms' restaurants, shipping contracts that could survive sunlight. He made it known in rooms where men listened carefully that children and families were no longer acceptable pressure points in his city. Some called it weakness. One man laughed at the wrong table and lost every contract he had before sunset. Cole came into Damon's study one evening with a file in his hand. You are burning half your kingdom. Damon stood by the window watching Abby chase fireflies in the garden with Miles walking at a respectful distance. Then it was the wrong half. Cole looked out at the yard. She changed you. Damon watched Abby cup her hands around a flash of light, then release it. No, he said. She showed me what was already costing too much. Cole was quiet for a moment. Mara would have liked that answer. Damon did not look away from the garden. She would have argued with it first. Cole smiled faintly. Probably. Life did not become simple, but it became filled with ordinary things Damon had never thought to want. A toothbrush with a cartoon bird appeared beside his black shaving kit. Abby's school papers covered one corner of the dining table. Crayon marks showed up on a chair leg, and nobody died for it. The refrigerator became crowded with drawings, spelling tests, a picture of Mara, and a crooked note that said, pancakes need bubbles before flipping. Dr. Nora kept coming. At first, Abby stayed careful during their sessions. Then, one afternoon, she cried so hard Damon heard it from the hall, and stood with both hands against the wall, forcing himself not to enter. When Nora opened the door later, Abby came out, red-eyed, exhausted, and still standing. Damon crouched. Do you want space? Abby shook her head. Do you want me to sit? She nodded. So he sat on the hallway floor beside her while staff walked past pretending not to see their boss with his back against the wall and his daughter leaning against his shoulder. At school, Abby began to make friends. One girl named Sophie liked her star socks. A boy named Caleb, unfortunately named in Damon's opinion, shared colored pencils with her. Abby came home one day with a birthday invitation and held it out like it might explode. Can I go? Damon read the address 3 times before Rebecca took the invitation from his hand. It is a birthday party, not a hostage negotiation. He looked at her. Rebecca sighed. 2 discreet guards, no visible weapons, no interrogation of parents. Damon accepted this with visible difficulty. Abby went to the party. She came back with frosting on her sleeve and a small paper crown on her head. Damon kept the crown on his desk after she went to bed. Then came the school presentation. The assignment was called My Family. Abby worked on the drawing for 3 nights at the kitchen table. Damon never asked to see it before she was ready. He had learned that some doors opened only from the inside. On the morning of the presentation, Damon wore a dark suit without the usual gold cufflinks. Abby inspected him by the front door. You look scary. I am attending a school presentation. You still look scary. He took off his black tie and replaced it with a softer gray one Rebecca had bought for this exact reason. Abby considered him again. Less scary. I will take that as progress. In the classroom, Damon sat in the back on a chair too small for him. His knees looked ridiculous. Cole stood outside the building because Abby had said only parents were allowed inside, and for once, Cole did not argue. Children went one by one, showing drawings of mothers, fathers, siblings, dogs, grandparents, houses, and vacations. Then Abby stood. She carried her paper to the front of the room. Her voice was small at first, but clear. "This is my family." Damon stopped moving. The picture showed a woman with dark curls standing beneath a crescent moon. Beside her was a little girl in star socks. On the other side stood a tall man with rolled sleeves and a pale crescent mark on his wrist. The man had eyes now. He had a face. He even had a small, uneven smile. The teacher leaned closer. "Can you tell us who they are?" Abby looked at the drawing, then at Damon. "That is my mom. Her name was Mara. She sang when she was sad and happy. She is in heaven, but her picture is in our kitchen." The classroom grew gentle. "That is me, and that is my dad." Damon's hand tightened around the edge of the tiny chair. Abby smiled shyly. "He makes bad pancakes, but he keeps trying." The children giggled. The teacher smiled. Damon lowered his head and pretended to adjust his cuff. The crescent scar on his wrist showed beneath the sleeve. When Abby returned to her seat, she passed him without saying anything, but her fingers brushed his hand. It was enough. That evening, the house held dinner at the kitchen table instead of the formal dining room. Mrs. Alvarez made pasta. Cole brought bread. Rebecca arrived with wine and legal documents she promised not to open until after dessert. Miles brought a bag of oranges from a street vendor because Abby had once mentioned liking them. Nora came with a small box of cookies and no professional expression. Damon stood at the stove stirring sauce under Mrs. Alvarez's supervision. Abby sat at the table arranging forks. "Do we need this many people?" she asked. Damon looked around the kitchen. Cole was arguing with Rebecca about whether garlic bread counted as a vegetable. Miles was showing Nora a photograph of a heron he had taken by the river. Mrs. Alvarez was telling Damon not to burn the sauce. Mara's photograph smiled from the refrigerator above a dozen drawings. Damon looked back at Abby. Yes, she seemed pleased by that. During dinner, Cole told a story about Damon at 19 trying to steal a car that would not start. Damon told him to stop speaking. Abby demanded the rest of the story. Rebecca laughed into her wine. Even Damon smiled, though he tried not to make it obvious. After dessert, Abby climbed onto the chair beside Damon. She noticed his sleeve had slipped back, showing the crescent scar. Without speaking, she rolled up her own sleeve and placed her wrist beside his. The two marks matched beneath the kitchen light. Abby studied them. "Do you think it means we match?" Damon looked at the scar he had spent a lifetime treating like an old sentence passed down through blood. On her wrist, it looked different. Not a curse. Not a warning. A bridge. "I think it means I was supposed to find you." Abby looked up at him. "I found you." Damon's mouth softened. "Yes," he said. "You did." She leaned against him then. Not by accident. Not in sleep. By choice. The kitchen continued around them, warm and noisy and alive. Later that night, after the guests had gone and the house had settled, Damon walked upstairs to Abby's room. The door was half open. Moonlight touched the green walls. Abby slept under a blanket covered in stars, her stuffed rabbit tucked beneath one arm. The moon-shaped nightlight glowed softly beside the bed. Damon stood in the doorway and listened to the quiet. Not empty quiet. Home quiet. On the wall above Abby's desk hung her newest drawing. It showed New Orleans beneath a crescent moon. The river curved through the city like a dark ribbon. An old white house stood beneath oak trees. In front of it, two people held hands. At the bottom, in careful child handwriting, Abby had written one sentence. Home is where someone stays. Damon touched the scar on his wrist. For years, that mark had belonged to blood memory and old pain. It had reminded him of the family he came from, the violence he inherited, and the kind of man he had once believed he had no choice but to become. Now it meant Abby. It meant Mara's last act of trust. It meant the rain-soaked night a little girl walked into a room full of dangerous men and made the most feared man in New Orleans afraid of losing something more precious than power. Damon stepped quietly into the room and pulled the blanket a little higher over Abby's shoulder. She stirred but did not wake. From the hallway, Cole's voice came softly. "She asleep?" Damon turned. "Yes." Cole looked past him at the small room, the drawings, the nightlight, the child who had changed the gravity of the house. "You all right?" Damon looked back at Abby. For once the question did not feel impossible. "No," he said quietly. "But I am here." Cole nodded. "That may be enough for tonight." Damon stood in the doorway a little longer after Cole left. Outside, New Orleans carried on with its music, its sins, its bargains, its ghosts. Somewhere in the city, men still whispered Damon Cross's name with fear. Somewhere, enemies still measured his choices and wondered what fatherhood had done to him. They would not understand. A man like Damon had spent his life collecting titles: boss, king, devil, ghost, names given by frightened men in dark rooms. But inside the old house beneath the oak trees, a little girl had given him another one: Dad. And somehow that became the only title he cared to keep.